The disappearance of 46-year-old Dawn Sandoval quickly turned into a perplexing mystery, as it seemed she was entangled in a complicated web of relationships and shifting dynamics. It was possible that someone with dark motives was behind her disappearance, or perhaps it was all a fabrication, hiding something far more sinister. Her family believed she was just somewhere, and they had to find her. But the police were stunned when the search ultimately led them to a true monster. On April 16, 2018, at around 8:20 p.m. in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, the police received a 911 call. The caller explained that her nephew had returned home from school and noticed that his mother, the caller's sister, had not returned home. She mentioned that the last time the kids had seen their mother was around 10:30 the previous night. The caller reported that when the nephews went to school that morning, they said their mother wasn't home, although her cars, phone, and purse were still there. She confirmed they had contacted all of her sister's friends and people she communicated with daily, but no one had seen her.
911, what is the emergency?
My nephew came home from school and their mom, which is my sister, didn't come home.
What time was the last time that the kids talked to her? How long ago was that?
Last night, about 10:30.
And that's the last time they saw her?
Yeah. But from what my nephews tell me, when they went to school this morning, they said she wasn't here, but her cars were there. And her cell phone's here, her purse is here.
Are you guys wanting to report her as missing at this time?
Yes. We talked to all her friends, anybody that she talks to on a daily basis, but nobody's seen her. It's just freaky.
The caller expressed that the situation felt strange. Anita Sandoval reported her sister Dawn as missing, and the Rio Rancho officers immediately gathered details, including her physical description and photographs, to aid in the investigation. They noted that Dawn was 54 years old, with light brown hair, and had tattoos of SLE and a crown on her chest. At that point, the officers had no idea how important those tattoos would become. As the investigation unfolded, they arrived at Dawn's home, where her two sons and Anita anxiously awaited her return. Anita explained that her sister wasn't home, and it was completely out of character for her. She knew it was her sister's turn to have the children, as Dawn and her ex-husband had recently finalized their divorce and shared 50-50 custody. She mentioned that Dawn and her ex-husband had gone to bed around 10:30 the previous night, and when the children woke up to go to school that morning, neither of them was there. However, Dawn's cars, purse, and phone were all still at the house. Anita noted that Dawn's phone was still connected by her bed, and when her nephew opened it, there were many missed alerts. They had contacted everyone Dawn communicated with, but no one had seen her. Anita revealed that Dawn had been last seen with her ex-husband, Michael Insinius, who had been spending the night at her house despite their recent divorce. This raised questions for the investigators, and they were eager to learn more about Dawn's mental state following the divorce and whether she had been facing any threats. When asked about their last conversation, Anita said she had spoken with Dawn on Thursday, and Dawn had seemed fine. She assured the investigators that Dawn had never expressed thoughts of harming herself and was a strong woman who had endured difficult situations in the past. Anita mentioned that Dawn had experienced troubled relationships before and that the divorce wasn't particularly upsetting for her. However, the detectives began to wonder whether Dawn's history with failed relationships could be connected to her disappearance. Before focusing on her past, they decided to search the house, particularly Dawn's bedroom, for clues. They discovered that there were no signs of forced entry, but there were a few things that seemed unusual, such as the bed. The family described Dawn as a messy sleeper, but the bed was only semi-made, which struck them as odd. This suggested that Dawn hadn't been forcibly abducted, as there were no signs of a struggle. They continued their search through other rooms, including the bathroom, to check if she had taken any essential items. Surprisingly, her toothbrush, hairbrush, and other daily necessities were left behind, neatly arranged. These items were useful for collecting DNA evidence. Her purse, phone, and cars were also found untouched in their usual spots, with no evidence of foul play. Investigators then turned to Dawn's twins, Donovan and Dylan, who had been the last to see her with their father. Donovan explained that their father had been with them all day, attending games in the morning and then eating together. He recalled that Dawn had asked them to clean their room because they were trying to sell the house.
With us all day yesterday because we had games in the morning, and then we went to go eat, and then came back, and then he stayed here. Yeah. So good. They both went up there. Our mom came in and told us to clean the room because we're trying to sell our house.
According to Donovan and Dylan, everything had seemed normal that night, with their father staying over. But the next morning, neither parent was home, and when the children returned from school, the house was still empty. What intrigued the detectives was that Dawn had been planning to sell her house. They found it suspicious that she had disappeared just before the sale was finalized. They began to consider the possibility that financial motives or the impending property transaction might have played a role in her disappearance, potentially putting her in danger. With no signs of where she might have gone, it was critical for them to find her as soon as possible. Since Insinius was the last person with Dawn, they thought he might have information about her whereabouts. However, they were surprised to find that he was unavailable for questioning. After interviewing Anita, the detectives uncovered an entirely different story. Anita shared with the investigators that Mike, her sister's ex-husband, told her nephew that he hadn't stayed the night because Dawn felt uncomfortable with him being there. So he left. However, the twins insisted that he had stayed the night until 10:30 when they went to bed. When Anita spoke to him, she asked, "Where's my sister? You're apparently the last person to have seen her." He responded firmly, saying he didn't know. Feeling frustrated, Anita ended the conversation, stating that she didn't want to talk to him anymore. This discrepancy between Insinius' statement and the twins' account raised suspicions. However, Anita's revelation soon shifted the focus of the investigation. She mentioned that Dawn had recently started seeing someone new, a sheriff named Harold, whom she had met on a dating site. This new information made anyone connected to Dawn a person of interest. Despite this, the detectives decided to bring Insinius in for questioning, hoping to get a clearer understanding of his relationship with Dawn and his version of the events from that night. During the interrogation, the detectives asked him about their marriage, which had lasted for 18 years, and if the divorce was finalized. Insinius confirmed that it was finalized on February 23rd. He explained that they had separated in December, and after the divorce, he entered into a new relationship. However, he began reconnecting with Dawn in the days leading up to her disappearance. He claimed that on Thursday of the previous week, they had started talking more and working on their relationship. By Friday night and Saturday night, they were trying to work things out and move forward. He admitted that he realized he was losing his family and wanted to fix things. On the night of Dawn's disappearance, he said that she had asked him to leave around midnight because she felt uncomfortable staying the whole night with him. Insinius' statement seemed initially cooperative, and there were no immediate signs of guilt. However, as the detectives continued to investigate, they uncovered troubling details about Dawn's past. Before her marriage to Insinius, Dawn had been married to a man named Rick Truo, whom she fell in love with at 16. They had 3 children together, Ricky, Kevin, and Jonathan. Tragically, their happiness was overshadowed by a heartbreaking event: the death of their youngest son, Jonathan. At 10 months old, Jonathan was found stuck between the mattress and the railing of his crib. This devastating loss, coupled with Rick's traumatic experiences from the Gulf War, placed immense strain on their marriage. The emotional toll led to the dissolution of their 5-year marriage. Despite the tragedy, Dawn moved on and focused on her career as a dedicated nurse. She worked hard to rebuild her life. However, detectives soon discovered that another shock awaited them. Ricky, Dawn's eldest son, revealed an even darker part of their family's history. The whole fighter aspect of my mom came from her first marriage with my father. My real dad didn't really give her an easy plate to eat off of, and I was introduced to death at such a young age with my father being murdered. This revelation about Rick's murder added a new layer of complexity to the investigation, suggesting that Dawn's past might be tied to her disappearance in ways the detectives had not previously considered. As the investigation deepened, the mystery of Dawn's disappearance grew even more complex, with no new clues about her whereabouts. The detectives were now left to consider whether the two tragic events from Dawn's past, her son's death and her former husband's murder, might be connected to her current disappearance. After Rick's death, Dawn took on the responsibility of raising her two sons, Ricky and Kevin, on her own. She worked tirelessly to provide for them, slowly returning to a sense of normalcy in her life. While things improved, she still felt that something was missing. By 1999, she decided to embrace love once again when a friend introduced her to electrician Mike Andis. Captivated by his personality and work ethic, Dawn married him, and the couple had twins, Donovan and Dylan. Meanwhile, Ricky and Kevin grew up and eventually moved out. However, after 9 years of marriage, their relationship began to deteriorate when Dawn discovered that Andis was having an affair. Despite the pain of betrayal, Dawn chose to forgive him and give their marriage another chance. She realized the relationship was unhealthy, but she still hoped to salvage it. Unfortunately, Andis's disloyalty continued, and in 2017, on Dawn's birthday, he informed her that he wanted to end their marriage because he had fallen for a much younger woman, Melissa. The divorce was finalized within months, and although devastated, Dawn felt a sense of relief when it was over. Despite her history of failed marriages, she remained hopeful about finding love again. She immersed herself in social events, and against her friends' warnings, she began using dating sites casually, meeting several men. Dawn's dating life became complicated when she met two men, Harold Witt, a member of law enforcement, and Lucas, another man she met online. Through Dawn's phone records, investigators discovered that she was simultaneously dating both men. Her lifestyle seemed to suggest a love triangle, filled with betrayal and potential rivalry. As a result, everyone in her life became a person of interest. The investigation shifted focus to understand her last communications and her relationships with both Harold and Lucas. Detectives interviewed Harold, who explained that he and Dawn had been casually dating, but their relationship was not serious. He mentioned that Dawn's son, Kevin, had texted him on Sunday asking if he knew where Dawn was. Harold found it odd and later texted Dawn, asking if she was okay and telling her that her son was looking for her. Harold described Dawn as independent and upbeat with no signs of sadness. He insisted that their relationship was nothing serious and that he had always been upfront with her about not seeking anything deeper. He spoke positively about her, describing her as a good person who was always fun to be around. However, Harold's account provided no new insights into Dawn's disappearance. The detectives then turned their attention to Lucas, who had met Dawn on Match.com in March 2018. Lucas explained that they had started texting and began dating shortly after. He expressed shock over her disappearance, describing her as a wonderful person with a big heart and offering his help in any way possible. With no clear answers from Harold or Lucas, the investigation into Dawn's disappearance grew more tangled. The detectives now faced the difficult task of unraveling the complex web of relationships in Dawn's life to determine whether her sudden disappearance was connected to her past relationships or if something more sinister was at play. Their primary goal was to find Dawn and ensure her safety, but every lead seemed to deepen the mystery. As detectives continued to investigate the case, they found themselves at a crossroads. Despite the seemingly heartfelt cooperation from Dawn's recent boyfriends, Harold and Lucas, and their genuine concern for her well-being, there were still unanswered questions. Both men had spoken positively about Dawn, but they offered little to no insight into her disappearance. The detectives were left to wonder whether they were being misled or if something more sinister was unfolding. However, a significant tip from Lucas shifted the direction of the investigation. He mentioned Dawn's old rival, Melissa, who had a history with both Dawn and her ex-husband Mike. According to Lucas, Melissa had made concerning statements about Dawn's twin sons, claiming they had told her that Melissa sometimes drove under the influence. This information became crucial because just days before her disappearance, Dawn had called 911 to report that Melissa had been driving recklessly while high with her children in the car. Dawn had even gone so far as to have Melissa arrested for her dangerous behavior. Melissa's reckless lifestyle, including substance abuse and other unhealthy habits, made her a prime suspect. Detectives learned that Melissa had been Dawn's rival for years, and her tumultuous relationship with Mike had contributed to Dawn's second divorce. Despite being in jail at the time of Dawn's disappearance, detectives could not rule her out entirely. They were aware that criminals could orchestrate things from behind bars, and it seemed plausible that Melissa might have played a role in Dawn's vanishing. When detectives interviewed Melissa in jail, they were taken aback by her statements. Melissa suggested that Dawn had staged her own disappearance to frame others. She described Dawn as someone who would go to extreme lengths to win, even if it meant getting the last laugh by making others look guilty. Melissa's suspicions seemed to point toward Dawn orchestrating her own disappearance, but when detectives spoke to Dawn's son, Cav, he strongly disagreed with this theory. He insisted that his mother would never disappear voluntarily without contacting anyone, especially for so long. The investigation took a dramatic turn when detectives uncovered more about Melissa's communications with Mike while she was in jail. They discovered phone calls between Melissa and Mike, where he had told her to contact him on a different phone. His work phone. This was an unexpected revelation because Mike had not mentioned having a work phone during his previous interviews with the detectives. The detectives seized both of Mike's phones for analysis, hoping to uncover any new information that could lead to Dawn's whereabouts. Upon examining the phones, they discovered that Mike's GPS settings were set to track his repeated locations. One key detail stood out. On the night Dawn went missing, Mike's phone did not leave her house until 12:31 a.m., 2 minutes after he had sent her a text message that said, "I love you." This text was sent just before Mike left her driveway, raising significant concerns for the detectives. As they dug deeper into Mike's activities that night, the investigation shifted focus entirely toward him. While Melissa's involvement remained unclear, the GPS data and the strange phone call between her and Mike were hard to ignore. The detectives then turned to reviewing CCTV footage from Mike's neighborhood, hoping to gain more clarity. The combination of the emerging clues and the suspicious circumstances surrounding Mike's actions that night was beginning to paint a clearer picture, and the investigation into Dawn's disappearance was now poised to uncover shocking truths about those closest to her. The detectives were now deep into their investigation, with more evidence pointing toward inconsistencies in Mike's statements and actions. The discovery of surveillance footage from a gas station showed that Mike had stopped for gas and an energy drink at 12:45 a.m. after leaving Dawn's house. This raised a red flag for the detectives. Why would Mike need an energy drink so late at night, especially considering the circumstances? It felt out of place, given that the situation involved the possible disappearance of his estranged wife. The footage from his neighborhood's security camera confirmed that Mike's truck had entered the area after leaving Dawn's house, which aligned with his earlier statements. However, the truck didn't leave the neighborhood until about 8 minutes later, and Mike didn't return home until around 2:50 a.m., nearly 2.5 hours after he'd left Dawn's house. This was highly irregular, because the cell phone data showed Mike's phone never left Dawn's house, which was a significant contradiction to the surveillance footage and Mike's timeline. His phone had stayed at Dawn's house, but Mike had clearly left the premises. The inconsistencies between the phone data, surveillance footage, and Mike's story made the detectives suspicious. They were puzzled by the gap in information regarding Mike's whereabouts during those 2.5 hours. While the footage didn't provide concrete evidence of where Mike had gone, it did confirm that he hadn't gone straight home, as he claimed. Mike had left his phone behind at Dawn's house, which prevented the GPS data from giving any clues about his location. the detectives decided to bring Mike in for another round of questioning, hoping that the pressure of the mounting evidence would force him to crack. However, when they confronted him, he seemed unusually calm and almost detached from the situation. Instead of focusing on Dawn's well-being or offering information, he appeared more concerned with the progress of the investigation. His questions about what the detectives knew, coupled with his lack of urgency or concern for Dawn, gave the detectives a strong sense that Mike was more interested in controlling the narrative than actually helping to find Dawn. When questioned about his whereabouts that night, Mike's explanations seemed increasingly odd. His answers didn't align with the timeline and details they had gathered so far, and his behavior appeared evasive. It was clear that the detectives were dealing with someone who was hiding something, but what was it? Mike's discomfort was palpable as they continued to probe him for the truth, and the detectives were more determined than ever to uncover what really happened the night Dawn disappeared. The inconsistencies in Mike's statements continued to pile up during the interrogation. His explanation for leaving Dawn's house was bizarre. He claimed he went for a drive because he didn't want to be home alone, yet he drove to a secluded area at the end of the city near a culvert, where he smoked marijuana and fell asleep. The detectives found this reasoning contradictory. If he didn't want to be alone, why would he go to such a remote and isolated location? Mike's explanation only raised more questions and seemed like an attempt to deflect the truth. When asked what he was doing out there, Mike insisted that he simply wanted to be alone to smoke, yet this was a complete reversal of his earlier statement that he didn't want to be alone. The detectives were growing increasingly frustrated with his evasive answers, but they knew they needed to be patient and strategic to get to the truth. Throughout the interrogation, Mike's discomfort became more apparent when they raised the possibility of Dawn still being alive. His response was oddly detached, despite the serious nature of the investigation. He portrayed himself as a hopeful, grieving ex-husband, still clinging to the belief that Dawn might be alive. His demeanor suggested he wasn't as emotionally invested in finding Dawn as he should have been, and his vague responses only deepened the detective's suspicion that he was hiding something. Despite these inconsistencies, the interrogation ended without a definitive breakthrough. Mike remained the prime suspect, but the detectives had no hard evidence to pin him down. Then, on May 5, 2018, a major development in the case occurred. A chilling 911 call came in from a biker who reported a disturbing discovery. This call would mark a turning point in the investigation, bringing the detectives closer to uncovering the truth about Dawn's disappearance.
Please fire and rescue.
Hi. I was wondering, is there any way you could send the other just the end of Southern?
The end of Southern?
Yeah, like the very, very end, I guess you call it, like the backbone.
Uh-huh. For what reason?
I don't know if it's an animal or a person, but it kind of looks...
The 911 call from the biker had provided the breakthrough the detectives had been desperately waiting for. The discovery of a human arm in the remote desert area of West Rio Rancho was a grim and unsettling moment. As the officers arrived, they found the body partially burned, and the sight of the arm became the first unmistakable clue that this was likely a homicide. The presence of a tattoo on the arm gave the detectives a clear lead, and after verifying the design, it was confirmed that the victim was indeed Dawn. Further investigation of the crime scene revealed additional disturbing details, such as signs of a fire that had consumed much of the body. Dawn's wallet and keys were also found near her remains, suggesting that she had been murdered and then set on fire. It became evident to the detectives that this was not an accident, but a deliberate act of violence. The discovery of the body shattered the hope that Dawn might still be alive, and her family and friends were left devastated by the tragic news. However, while the evidence clearly pointed to Mike, the case was far from resolved. There were still many unanswered questions, and the detectives needed more concrete proof to definitively link Mike to the crime. Given the circumstantial evidence, such as Mike's suspicious behavior, his presence near Dawn's house on the night of her disappearance, and the fact that his truck was likely used to transport the body, the detectives obtained a search warrant for his home and truck. With this new evidence in hand, they began their search, hoping it would yield the crucial breakthrough they needed to bring justice for Dawn. The discovery of the small red stain in Mike's truck proved to be the key piece of evidence that the detectives had been hoping for. Even though weeks had passed since Dawn's disappearance, and Mike had ample time to cover his tracks, the blood evidence was irrefutable. Once forensic analysis confirmed that the DNA found on the truck matched Dawn's, it directly contradicted Mike's previous statement that she had never been in his truck. This was crucial because it not only placed her in the vehicle, but also suggested that something violent had occurred in it. Mike's attempt to remain calm and composed, even in the face of the crime scene photos, raised further suspicion. His cold demeanor and strategic invocation of legal rights when questioned were signs that he might have been trying to protect himself. However, the blood evidence now spoke for itself, providing a solid link between him and the crime. The forensic analysis gave detectives the leverage they needed to move forward with the case. Armed with the damning evidence, they were now able to present their findings to the district attorney's office, laying the groundwork for charging Mike. The strength of the forensic evidence, combined with the mounting inconsistencies in his story, made it clear that the case against him was becoming undeniable. Mike's days of evading justice were numbered, and it was only a matter of time before he would be taken into custody. The detectives knew they were getting closer to solving the mystery of Dawn's tragic death, and the case was about to take a decisive turn toward justice. Mike Encina's arrest marked the end of a long and painful investigation, but it also revealed the deep complexity of his actions. The lack of a criminal record and no financial motive made his crime even more chilling. The detectives' theory about his actions that night aligned with the evidence they had gathered. An argument with Dawn escalated into a violent act, leading to her death. His frustration and desperation, especially after their divorce and her continual rejections, seemed to have pushed him over the edge. What was most disturbing, however, was his complete lack of remorse. After ending Dawn's life, he acted as if nothing had changed, continuing his relationship with Melissa and even attempting to cover his tracks. His cold, calculated behavior, from the murder to the tampering of evidence, demonstrated a dark, twisted side of his character. The detectives were right to believe that this wasn't an act of sudden rage, but a culmination of anger, manipulation, and possibly an obsessive need to control. His calculated attempt to erase all traces of the crime and his indifference to Dawn's death highlighted how dangerous and self-serving he had become. The investigation revealed that the motive wasn't money or revenge in the typical sense, but a deeper, more insidious desire to possess someone who had rejected him for so long. As the case moved to trial, it was clear that this was no ordinary crime, but rather an example of how a once-loving relationship could unravel into a tragic ending due to emotional manipulation, desperation, and a lack of accountability. The justice system was now tasked with holding Mike Encina accountable for his actions and ensuring that such a tragedy would not be repeated. Michael Encina showed no concern for his sons, who had lost their loving mother. His actions reflected a cold, psychopathic nature, willing to do anything to fulfill his desires. Unable to accept that Dawn was moving on without him and seeking new love, he couldn't cope with the reality, despite the many times he had betrayed her. With overwhelming evidence against him, there was no escape from the punishment he deserved. On November 15, 2018, 7 months after the murder, the case was presented to a grand jury, and Encina pleaded not guilty. However, investigators had a clear theory about his actions, supported by irrefutable evidence. After a long legal battle, in August 2019, Encina was convicted of second-degree murder and tampering with evidence and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. The family of Dawn Sandoval finally received justice, though the painful truth remained hard for them to accept. I have a collage of a bunch of her pictures, and there's one picture where she's smiling, but her eyes say something different, said a family member. And I sit there, and I look at that one picture, and I would just take it in, until the sadness is over, the hurt is over. Another relative shared how the jealousy of Encina seemed to be the driving force behind his actions, I feel that the jealousy is where it drove him actually to do what he did, to actually kill her. I thought about it for a long time, and I honestly think it is because of her moving on. As the family dealt with the loss of Dawn, they also had to face the untimely death of her eldest son, Ricky, who tragically died in a motorcycle accident at the age of 31. These heartbreaking events left the family reeling, and all anyone can do is hope for healing, strength, and happiness as they try to move forward. On August 23, 2022, the family suffered another loss when Ricky died. The pain of losing 4 cherished family members in such a short span is unimaginable. Our heartfelt condolences go out to Dawn Sandoval's family. What are your thoughts on this heartbreaking case? Do you believe the justice system gave Michael Encinas the punishment he deserved? Or should the sentence have been harsher? How can we work together to end abusive relationships and prevent such tragedies? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you. If you found this video impactful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this.